Okay, so joining us now to discuss how major life changes can impact a woman's relationship with her money are the authors of It's Your Money, Honey. Please welcome Laura McDonald and Susan Meisner. I like that title. That's a great title. And where are you both from?
We're from Winnipeg.
Winnipeg! Yay! Okay, so how did you get together to start writing this book?
Well, it all started with our website, goldagirlfinance.ca, and it was sort of conceived in the midst of the financial crisis. I was a financial advisor. I had been doing that for 18 years. And I was continually meeting with men. And I was like, where are all the ladies?
And I was one of those ladies that wasn't going in to meet with a financial advisor. So I have a marketing and communications background, but I was one of those women who were smart, we're educated, we've got great jobs, but we're leaving the discussion of finance up to our spouse to handle, just relinquishing control. So how do we change up the messaging to make it a little bit more accessible or relevant for the modern woman?
Okay, well, I love it. In fact, I just love it. It's Your Money, Honey. I like that title already. The key questions every woman should ask before getting married. Okay, let's start with that.
Okay.
Oh, if I could do it again. But no, okay. Do I need a prenup?
You might.
Yes.
Well, there's a few things that we think you should consider.
Okay.
So one is, are you bringing significant assets into the relationship? So, or two, we often think about assets, but a lot of us have a lot of debt. So if one spouse is bringing in a lot of debt, you want to consider how do you protect yourself from that debt.
So full disclosure from the other person as well.
That's more important these days than the asset equation in a lot of cases. And are there children involved? We're both mothers. If something were to happen, we were to get divorced and go into a second marriage, we want to make sure that our assets are protected for our children above all else.
It's not very romantic to talk about, but you have to talk about that stuff.
You absolutely have to talk about it. It's the basis of a great, strong relationship is communication. So, and that starts with money.
And then you also say, what about inheritance?
Well, inheritance is a big one because, you know, there is a big transfer of wealth coming for many people in this country. And, you know, a lot of us, you know, get an inheritance. Maybe we put it into the family home, which is a great thing. But if you want to protect that asset, you don't want to be putting it into a family asset that could potentially be split during a divorce.
Okay. So you're saying, are you saying that? Is she saying that if you get into inheritance, that you should put it in a different sort of fund? Is that what you're saying?
Well, you know, most financial advisors would say, yes, you want to keep that separate from the family assets if you can or if you want to, because in a divorce, that money could be split. And if that comes, you know, from your family, you know, you want to keep that, you know,
in your name. For your, or put it in some kind of a fund for kids or children.
It's not he versus she. You know, it's just, I think too many women don't think about financial legacy and wealth creation for themselves.
That's a good point.
And that's very important. Like traditional media tends to focus on penny pinching for women. And Golden Girl Finance attempts to go beyond that to talk about the stock market and investing and creating wealth for yourself and for your family.
You're absolutely right. We always talk, even on the show, talking about things on a budget, saving money. Now we're talking about investing. So these are conversations like prenup, inheritance, all those guys, not very sexy to talk about, but that's a conversation, what you're saying you have to have.
It's absolutely a conversation that you should have before you're going into a marriage. It's a conversation you should have throughout your marriage.
And when you're not in a time of vulnerability. So if you wait to have those discussions during times of emotional stress, you know, do it when you're calm and happy and can have the discussion.
Now, because for common law relationships, I just want to make mention, if you're in a common law relationship, every province is different with how they describe the length of time as when you begin a common law relationship. You can be living with somebody and not talking about it. That's when you can actually introduce a prenup. So there's a lot of things you need to research, correct?
There's a lot of things that you need to think about. Sometimes we're so excited and you jump in, but you really do need to know the rules of common law in your area. To protect yourself, you need to write things down. You should also be looking at potentially considering an agreement before going into that, because the statistics show that, you know, common law relationships fail 2 times more than a marriage.
Right. So, so what you're saying is you're going into it, hopefully before you move in, that you have this discussion. Again, not very sexy, romantic, before you get into the cohabitation point of it and have an agreement.
Yes. Talk about it, write down what assets you're bringing.
And this kind of agreement, where does it go to a lawyer to get notarized or what?
Well, yeah, and you know, at least you should talk to a lawyer and write everything down. You know, it doesn't mean that you're necessarily going to need it. You put it in a drawer and forget about it, but it's there for you value.
It's peace of mind for some people, right?
They generally call it a cohabitation agreement. So you want to write down what each of you are bringing into the marriage. I mean, what if you have your own, into the common law relationship, but if you have your own home and you're letting somebody move in with you, well, it could be 3 years later that the law will decide how, divide the assets up.
Right.
So you want to, and also with co-signing, I think we're often in love, we agree to co-sign. Well, debt isn't 50-50, it's, you're 100% liable if that person defaults on the debt.
Yeah, they take off.
We have a lot of readers on the website, they co-sign on stuff, and then they're stuck with all this debt.
I'm sure you have. I'm sure you have a lot of people writing into you. Now, being moms, how did that change your attitude towards money? Because you both have 2 kids, am I right?
We do.
I have 3.
You have 3. Okay.
And they're all girls. So when you become a mother, things definitely change. You think about things differently.
Are those yours? Oh, Laura, they're so cute. Yeah, they do change your attitude. And there's
mine.
Okay.
So you do think about things differently. You start thinking about legacy.
Yeah.
You start thinking about securing your future for your kids. And, a lot of times we start thinking about saving for our kids' education. And we always say to women and remind them that, save for your retirement at the same time, because kids can borrow for their education, but you can't borrow for your retirement.
I see.
So you definitely want to start thinking about that.
So how can we be a better role model for our kids? I think whether they be boys or little girls, but I think it's ironic that you two have this website and you have this book and you have girls. That's really interesting. You say live within your means.
Definitely live within your means. I mean, you are the best role model. So showing your kids, that you're actually living within the money that you're earning, and that they can model that.
We always talk about allowance for kids, but we have a debt expert on our site, and she always talks about an allowance for adults, a cash allowance.
Sure.
So on those expenses that you can control, food and shopping and eating out, give yourself a cash allowance just like you give your kids every week, and that's it. When it's done, it's done. You can't get any credit
Well, the other
that.
thing is that when the power of the kids when they're in the grocery store, for example, and they really want something that's a little extra special treat, and you say, I'd love to, but we can't afford it this week. That's strong messaging. You also say, let the kids make mistakes. What do you mean by that?
Let the kids make mistakes, and that really helps to teach them about value and the value of money.
So give me an example.
Well, say it comes down to a toy that they have to choose.
Right.
Let them make that choice, and if they've made the wrong choice, let them go through that. Little kids, little mistakes. Big kids or big adults.
Really big, like
mistakes.
boats and cars and houses and mortgages.
Well, exactly.
I agree with that, because you got to have that feeling of what it feels like.
Of loss.
Yeah, you really have to feel it. The next one is talk openly about family, money, the finances. There's a certain point they say that you can let your kids know how much you make so they can see how limited or how the funding is working. So when do you have that conversation, Laura?
Well, they have to be a little bit older, I think, when they're in their preteen sort of years. But talk to them about salaries, or say, what do you want to be when you grow up? Research the salaries, and then talk about the household expenses, so they know the life that you're accustomed to costs money, and this salary that I make as an adult may sound huge, but there's so many expenses that go along with it, because there's always both sides to the equation, income and expenses, and you have to discuss both. So
They have to see what the dollar sign is and how much things cost. I agree with that. And then you say buy shares for the kids.
Well, when my first daughter was born, I bought her shares in Disney. And that's a great way to get...
You did? What a smart mommy.
You can buy one share even.
Get them... So get them engaged in the things that they like. It's all about talking and learning about things that you know. So whether that's Apple, stock, or research in motion,
smart,
or help them, understand the stock market, and that they can influence the stock market through the things that they like. And follow it in the news.
Follow it in the news. Open up that business section and go, okay, this is what the stock did today. And if you don't, you learn along with your kids.
Exactly.
Okay, and you should be taking a meeting with your financial expert. Right? You should have the meeting.
Well, learn the lingo when you're 14 and not 40, because there's still so many people who are adults who don't understand how the stock market works, and that's what we try to do with the book and the website.
Well, here we go. Speaking of the book, it's your money, honey. I love it. Everyone in the audience is going to get a copy of Laura and Susan's book. Thank you so much. From Winnipeg, Manitoba. That's the show for today. We'll see you tomorrow. Have a good one. Thank you for watching. All right.
Get Guests of the Marilyn Denis Show stay